If you asked the Valdorian High Command what creatures they feared most, they'd list names that shook entire planetary systems: the Vroth hexworm, the nebulous Moor serpent of Oxenine, or the neural synapse leech from the ether void. Not once would anyone mention a four-legged, tongue-lolling earth creature named Diesel, which frankly made sense, until Diesel chewed through reinforced steel. Is that a containment breach? High xenobiologist Iskral squinted at the feed in disbelief, all four of his compound eyes narrowing. What broke into Chamber Delta 7? That was rated for Class Omega predators. That's where we keep the plague maw. Yes, sir, muttered an aide. That chamber has just been entered by that. Iskral's gaze slid to the center monitor. A small, muscular quadruped with short fur and a blocky head stood wagging its tail inside the heavily guarded enclosure. Its mouth hung open, tongue swinging, and it had the facial expression of something that clearly thought it had done something amazing. "That's a Pitbull," said the human delegate behind them, suppressing a chuckle as he sipped from a travel mug. "Name's Diesel." Iskral turned slowly. "That thing broke in? That thing breached containment security protocols designed to hold galaxy-sterilizing monstrosities?" Technically, he didn't break in. He chewed through the side panel. Took about 4 minutes. Didn't even look tired afterward. We told him to go find the toy, and, well, he's motivated. Diesel began running excited circles inside the enclosure, occasionally stopping to sniff the pulsating cocoon of the dormant plague maw. Then he sat, looked up at the surveillance camera, and sneezed. "You put that inside a death chamber?" Iskral sputtered, antennae rigid with alarm. "Well," said the human, shrugging, "we were trying to see what he'd do around hostile biological energy signatures. You gave a Deathworld predator free rein over an ancient hive horror." "Deathworld predator? Buddy, he sleeps on a SpongeBob blanket. He's a very good boy." Iskral stared blankly. Then he turned to the screen again, where Diesel had now picked up something vaguely glowing and pulsating, a leftover parasitic spine cluster, and was gleefully tossing it in the air and catching it in his teeth. "That object can liquefy spinal fluid through proximity." "Oh yeah," the human nodded. "He tried to swallow it. We had to bribe him with a hot dog to drop it." Iskral blinked all four eyes independently, a sure sign of a nervous system override. "I don't understand. This Pitbull isn't listed in your Earth threat catalog. This isn't a classified bioweapon." The human delegate smiled. "Nope, just a rescue dog. Found in Ohio, actually. Shelter said he failed obedience school because he was too excited." "And you brought him here? To our high-security research facility?" "I mean, yeah. We needed a low-maintenance biological interface, something that can detect mood, intent, and stress responses in high-tension environments. Pitbulls are good at that." "You brought a military facility what is essentially a slobbering, muscular land shark with a heart problem and abandonment trauma." "Exactly. He's very emotionally aware. Great with kids." Iskral backed away from the screen slightly as Diesel barked once, loudly enough to cause a flicker in the audio sensors. Then Diesel curled into a ball beside the sealed containment node and snored so hard that the vibration made the plague maw shift a few microns to the left. Iskral gulped. "That thing shouldn't be allowed near weapons, or pressure-sensitive devices, or living matter." The human leaned closer, grinning. "You should see his brother." Iskral froze. "There's another?" "Yeah, Brutus, trained for tactical response. We'll be testing him tomorrow." The footage from the Brutus test wouldn't be leaked for another 9 days. But when it did, it circulated across 32 worlds in under 6 hours. The video began innocuously. A quiet nighttime exterior of an off-world human outpost. Faint glimmers of starlight touched the alloy rooftops. There were no visible guards, just the sound of crickets, Earth-brought insects, adapted and thriving, and the low hum of automated perimeter beacons. Then came the shimmer. A warband of Kargsari raiders, phase-cloaked and heat-shielded, slipped through the outer defenses. They expected resistance from turrets, maybe 1 or 2 humans with primitive rifles. They did not expect Brutus. The camera shifted sharply as motion sensors tracked the dog's movement, a blur across open terrain, low to the ground, silent. Then it pounced. The first Kargsari collapsed with a shriek that short-circuited his comms. Brutus had gone for the wrist, not to maim, but to disarm. The plasma blade clattered to the floor as the alien thrashed. The others tried to react, too late. Brutus moved like liquid muscle and calculation, zigzagging across uneven terrain, using crates and barriers as cover. He didn't just attack, he hunted. One raider was tripped with a strategic low-body slam. Another, the group's comms officer, was dragged screaming behind a storage unit and left dangling by his leg from his own tactical harness. It was precision, it was learned behavior, it was training, but not the kind they expected from a dumb animal. One frame in the footage, now infamous, showed Brutus pausing mid-run, eyeing the last 3 aliens regrouping. His chest rose, his tail stiffened, his mouth opened slightly, panting. Then he grinned. It was an expression not meant for an animal. That grin made galactic history. Back in the Valdorian facility, Iskral hit pause. The footage froze with Brutus in mid-air, lunging with terrifying focus. The xenobiologist's claws trembled. "This footage has not been altered." "Nope," said the human envoy cheerfully, arms crossed. "He is not augmented?" "Not cybernetically, no." "Then, how does he know to disable weapon hands, to target phase disruption belts, to sabotage team formations?" The human offered a lazy smile. "We don't train them how, we train them who." Iskral turned. "Who?" The smile widened. "To protect, to defend, and when they see someone hurting someone they love." He let that hang. From the hallway, a muffled bark echoed. Diesel was awake, and he wanted his breakfast. In the aftermath of the raid, the surviving Karakzari were placed in medical suspension tanks. Not out of mercy, no, the Karakzari would have preferred death to the shame of survival, but for interrogation. Their bruises told one story, the footage told another, but it was the report that changed everything. Subject, Brutus. Species, Canis familiaris, Pitbull. Tactical outcome, 7 incapacitations, 0 fatalities. Behavioral pattern, defensive engagement, precision targeting. Conclusion, demonstrates high threat intelligence and loyalty-bonded aggression. And just like that, the galaxy had a new word added to its military threat index. Not Pitbull, not even Earth Canine. Number just, Brutus Protocol. Within 2 weeks, entire academies across multiple planetary systems began offering seminars with titles like Deathworld Companion Species, Lessons from the Canine Incident, and Brutus, Apex Loyalty Models in Human-Animal Symbiosis. And yet, despite all this, the Valdorian Council still didn't understand. How could something so adorably meat-shaped cause such panic? "You're saying he did that unsupervised?" Iskral's mandibles twitched, less from curiosity now and more from something bordering on fear. The human ambassador nodded, tilting his head toward a projection of Brutus dozing on a station couch with a blanket over him, tail thumping in his sleep. "Yep, unsupervised. We just said, 'Watch the base.' He took it from there." Iskral stared, then jabbed a claw toward the sleeping creature. "And you're telling me that is the same animal that disabled 7 war-hardened mercenaries without drawing blood?" "He doesn't like blood," the human said. "Makes his tummy weird." A long silence followed. Iskral's assistant leaned close. "Sir, the latest reports show 13 systems now tagging pitbulls as Class A-2 organic anomalies, same tier as psychic spores and living acid." "I know what that classification means, Mezek," Iskral hissed. "I wrote the standard." The human sipped his drink again. "You know, I think this whole situation says more about your assumptions than our animals." "Oh? You classified us as Deathworlders. Fine. But did you really think the only dangerous thing from Earth was humans?" Iskral blinked once, then twice. The human leaned forward. "We evolved alongside our threats. We didn't run, we domesticated them. Think about that. Our ancestors saw wolves and thought, 'Cool, let's turn that into a friend.' The archives didn't prepare them for Diesel's second incident. This time, it wasn't containment breach, it was containment negotiation. See, there was another alien species on board, classified and quarantined, the Thresk, carnivorous, hive-brained, vaguely mantis-shaped, utterly incapable of empathy. They communicated through enzyme mist, fully incompatible with humanoid social structures, until Diesel wandered into the airlock. "Why is the Pitbull in the Xenohazard docking bay?" Iskral screeched as alarms flared. He followed a smell, said the human liaison. Might have been leftover burger grease, hard to say. Diesel strolled past 4 laser barriers and 2 motion-triggered shock fields like they weren't even real. The Thresk, which had never stopped trying to claw its way out of containment, froze, for the first time in 2 weeks. It tilted its jagged head, stared at Diesel, and retracted all its claws. Diesel barked once. The Thresk emitted a soft blue haze, its species' signal for acknowledgement. Then it sat, mimicking Diesel. There was no protocol for that. By the time the security team arrived, Diesel had convinced the Thresk to roll over, probably on accident, or maybe he just wanted belly space. Either way, the threat level of the Thresk hive dropped 2 classifications in one afternoon. Iskral later wrote, under duress, "Subject appears to emit non-verbal behavioral override cues that bypass predatory instinct in multiple species. Recommended label, emotional gravity anchor." Diesel, meanwhile, was chewing on a tennis ball he'd found under a reactor. But the real incident? The one that triggered over 40 interspecies emergency meetings? That involved Brutus, again, and a Valdorian senator. His name was Salvek Tor, a high-ranking noble, advisor to the Prime War Council, and firm believer in the superiority of non-Deathworld logic. He also hated humans. He hated their adaptability, their unpredictability, their charming disregard for protocol. So when Brutus was invited to a cross-species exhibition to demonstrate Earth-animal cooperation, Salvek Tor did what any insecure imperialist would do. He tried to prove dominance by walking up to the Pitbull and throwing water on him. It was a cultural gesture, Salvek Tor protested later, a test of temperament, a harmless symbolic affront. Brutus, soaking wet, looked up at the senator with a silent, blank expression. He didn't growl, he didn't lunge, he walked away. And precisely 39 seconds later, the senator's personal shuttle, illegally parked in a restricted corridor, had all its wheels removed and stacked neatly on top of the ship, alongside 3 broken surveillance drones and what appeared to be a shredded copy of the senator's travel permit. Nobody saw Brutus do it, but everybody knew. Iskral sighed, pinching the bridge of his frontal ridge. He stacked the wheels. Yes, the human replied, deadpan, alphabetically. That doesn't even make sense. Exactly. The galactic consensus was slowly shifting, not out of fear, but out of respect, because in the hierarchy of threats, there's something more terrifying than a killer, something scarier than a warlord, a creature with the power to act and the judgment to choose not to. That's what made Earth animals dangerous. They weren't mindless. They were selective. And the moment they did choose you, you either became family or you became a story, a cautionary one. The Galactic Concord Summit was supposed to be a routine display of cross-species diplomacy, ribbons, anthems, ceremonial feathers, all that. No one expected an emotional hostage crisis, or that a Pitbull would be the one to end it. The summit hall gleamed with polished crystal, white marble flooring, and security drones disguised as decorative birds. Delegates floated in via grav chairs and ceremonial exosuits, draped in garish fabrics and species-specific honor chains. Translator fields hummed softly in the background. Brutus walked in on a leash held by specialist Monica Trent, a junior human representative. Iskral stiffened immediately. "Why is the dog here?" Trent gave a warm smile. "Brutus is here for the human pet demonstration. We're closing the summit with unity through companionship. Very low-risk segment." Low risk. Sure. Right until someone decided to hold a plasma knife to a diplomat's neck. It was a Malari splinter agent, later identified as Ka-Riv Noxt. He'd disguised himself as an aide to the Groxian delegation and managed to sneak a concealed blade into the building, no small feat, considering the Groxians considered knives sacred and basically wore them like jewelry. Ka-Riv waited until the final ceremony. Then, in full view of 17 galactic species and 36 media streams, he snatched Council 11 and held the blade to her throat. "If the Malari colonies are not restored their mining rights," he hissed, "your councillor dies as the first of many." Security units froze, protocols scrambled, diplomats began evacuating through invisible floor panels, and Brutus just stood there, quiet, leash slack in Monica's hand, not barking, not growling, just watching. Kariv didn't notice the dog at first, not until the room fell completely silent and he turned his head, slowly, and saw Brutus walking toward him. Not running, not lunging, just walking, every step deliberate, every muscle tuned. Kariv sneered. "You think this creature will stop me?" Brutus sat, tilted his head, and blinked, twice. Then, in an instant too fast for the cameras to track, he surged forward, not at the attacker, but at the blade, teeth clamping down with enough force to shear the hilt in half. Kariv shrieked, Leven was pulled backward to safety, and Brutus? Brutus spat the broken plasma core onto the floor, licked his lips, and sat down again. His tail thumped once, just once, as if to say, "Try it again." Footage from that moment broke every viewership record in galactic history. It was replayed in slow motion, overlaid with dramatic orchestral scores, and analyzed by tactical teams from over 50 military factions. Some tried to frame it as luck, others tried to claim advanced neural link control. But the truth, plain and simple, Brutus had read the situation and decided. Later that night, in a closed-door council meeting, Iskral stood alone beside a hologram of Diesel, projected in full tail-wagging, tongue-flopping detail. He turned to the group. I no longer believe these creatures are merely animals." There were murmurs, confusion, a few snorts of disbelief from more skeptical members. "You misunderstand," Iskral said firmly. "This isn't about aggression, or strength, or biological engineering." He gestured to Diesel licking peanut butter off a security panel. "They love." Silence. "They bond, not for survival, not for manipulation, but by choice." He turned toward the chamber's upper ledge, where Brutus sat next to Trent, tail wrapped around his paws, gazing down with the quiet focus of a seasoned warrior. "And when a creature that powerful chooses to care about you," Iskral exhaled slowly, "the galaxy changes." From that day forward, Earth's status was quietly updated in the Galactic Threat Archives. Not because of its nukes, not because of its military, not because of its politics, because of a dog, because somewhere in the spiral arms of the Milky Way there existed a species that raised apex predators and taught them to love. In the human sector, Diesel curled into a donut shape and snored so loudly that 3 high-ranking Threxian tacticians flinched on instinct. Brutus watched the security feed roll on loop, ears flicking slightly, tail never moving. He wasn't looking for enemies, he was watching for choices, because someone always made one. And when they chose wrong, well, that's when the leash came off. There are 2 types of interviews you expect at a galactic intelligence tribunal. The first involves a nervous junior officer trying not to say the wrong thing. The second involves a handcuffed war criminal trying not to confess too fast. This interview? This one involved a Pitbull and 3 translators, and the chair of the committee chewing antacids like they were candy. "I'm sorry, let me just clarify again," Council Chair Zevek Sorn said, voice tight. What did he do after the explosion?" Agent Tolik looked down at his data pad, sweat visible through his second skin. "He carried 3 injured humans and 1 Niralan through a kilometer of burning wreckage and returned twice to drag wounded Throskian infantry out of collapsed transport units." "And he did this voluntarily?" "Yes, ma'am. Nobody ordered him. In fact, most assumed he'd run." "Why would anyone assume that?" Tolik hesitated. "Because, well, he's a dog." The room went silent. Brutus sat on the floor beside the agent's chair, tongue out, tail sweeping lightly across the tiles, a full-blooded, muscle-bound, armor-scarred Pitbull in a galactic tribunal chamber, no leash, just presence. The silence stretched. Then the chair leaned forward slowly. "You do understand we're considering updating the Sentient Species Treaty because of this, don't you?" Tolik blinked. "Because of Brutus. Because of what he represents." The incident had occurred 4 days prior. A munitions freighter, XG-41, had suffered catastrophic internal failure during docking procedure at Outpost Beacon 9. Half the hangar vaporized. Fire suppression failed. Lives were lost. But those who lived, they owed their survival to a barking blur that tore through smoke, lifted metal with its jaw, and dragged body after body out of the inferno. Even when his paws bled, even when the left side of his face was scorched from proximity to an unshielded reactor spill, Even then, Brutus didn't stop. "He knew who to help?" another council member asked. "No," Tollick said. "He helped everyone. Species didn't matter. That is, not expected behavior for a Terran subspecies." "Neither is opening a cryo-hatch from the outside with your teeth," Tollick muttered. Someone in the back gasped. Brutus sneezed. The committee collectively flinched. Later that evening, the human delegation sat in their private lounge quarters, drinks in hand, exhausted but smug. Trent slumped onto the couch beside Diesel, who was chewing on a shoe that suspiciously resembled the footwear of a Groxian diplomat. "You think they'll really change the treaty?" she asked. Her commander, Darius Keene, leaned back and cracked a grin. "Doesn't matter if they do. The damage is done." "What do you mean?" He tapped a finger to his head. "They've seen it now, the thing they can't unsee." Trent raised an eyebrow. "That there's more to Earth than chaos and teeth, that even our monsters have hearts." Meanwhile, on a news broadcast halfway across the Lyraean sector, a panel of xenopsychologists debated the rise of what they now called emotive apexes. One argued it was the result of Earth's strange evolutionary pressure cooker. Another claimed it was a byproduct of constant exposure to emotionally bonded primates. But the third, an old Shervelec professor with eyes like molten gold, just smiled. "No," she said, "it's because they've been chosen. You don't get loyalty like that from training." "Then how?" her peer asked. "You get it from trust," she said softly. "Earned, not programmed, not bred." She gestured at the looping footage behind them of Brutus walking out of the fire, one unconscious Throskian slung gently across his back. "That is what a friend looks like." Back at Beacon 9, Brutus rested in a med pod with biogel patches coating his burns. He didn't bark, didn't move. He just watched. Diesel padded into the med bay, hopped up beside him, and promptly curled up. Their breathing synced, and for a moment there was peace, a raw, bone-deep calm that not even an orbital bombardment could shake. Far above them, Council Chair Zevek Sorn sat at her desk, drafting an emergency motion. Her eyes scanned the title again. Motion 114-A, Reclassification of Select Earth Origin Quadrupeds from Non-Sentient to Allied Biostrategic Partners. Her pen hovered, and then, beneath it, she wrote, "Never underestimate a creature that chooses love when fear is easier." When the first wave of Lakari dreadships entered Earth's solar perimeter, humanity didn't panic. They didn't posture either. They just made a call. Not to the Joint Tactical Force, not to Orbital Command, to Animal Command. More specifically, to Kennel Division 3. The galaxy would never be the same. Inside a subterranean facility beneath Yellowstone, quiet, cool, lit with amber-toned LEDs and the occasional bark echoing down the reinforced halls, an ancient red phone rang. The technician who picked it up said only 3 words: "It's go time." Moments later, a reinforced chamber slid open. Inside, Brutus lifted his head. He hadn't been summoned in months. That meant something bad had arrived. Next to him, Diesel yawned, flipped over, and kicked the wall in his sleep. "Let him nap," said the handler quietly. "You're on this one." Brutus stretched. A tendon cracked like thunder. The Lakari didn't expect a dog. Certainly not this dog. They had mapped Earth's defense network, missile silos, quantum barrier fields, weaponized satellites. But they hadn't accounted for biological response teams, teams that didn't require orders, didn't flinch, and didn't miss. Brutus deployed from low orbit in a single-occupant re-entry pod, outfitted with nothing but reinforced armor, a targeting chip, and a chew toy duct-taped to the panel as a motivational aid. He landed on the Lakari flagship, and the flagship didn't last the hour. The ship's black box, recovered weeks later, captured fragments of the internal assault. Screaming, sparking conduits, snarling, low, deliberate, and over it all, a soft female voice from a recorded memory file. "Who's a good boy? You're a good boy. Yes, you are." The Lakari War Council reviewed the data in absolute silence. One admiral vomited, another reportedly resigned, citing existential confusion. Back on Earth, Brutus stood on a grassy hill beneath a peach-hued sky. Diesel trotted beside him, a stick proudly held in his mouth like it was the crown of a forgotten king. A reporter approached cautiously. "Sir," she said, because at this point no one questioned calling him sir. "Any comment on what just happened?" Brutus didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just stared past her at the horizon, calm, alert, and very aware that someone else, somewhere, would make another bad decision. When they did, he'd be ready. Across the galaxy, statues went up. One on Trivax's moon, showing Brutus standing protectively over a child of every species. Another on Gelta Prime, cast from alloy melted from surrendered weapons, and one in the Valdorian capital itself, Diesel, mid-bark, tongue flapping, tail wagging, an icon of unpredictability and fearless love. Underneath it, etched in all languages, Earth did not send weapons, they sent guardians. Iskral, now semi-retired, gave a final address at the Intergalactic University of Ethics and Combat. He stood before his students, 33 species, none of whom laughed at Earth anymore. He tapped the screen behind him, an image of Brutus, then Diesel, then a quote, "You are either family or you're a target." He turned to the class. "Do not mistake gentleness for weakness," he said. "Do not assume the wagging tail means the creature cannot bite, and above all," he paused, "never touch the food bowl unless you're invited." Back on Earth, in a quiet home with a cracked porch and wildflowers overgrowing the fence, Brutus slept at the foot of a child's bed. Diesel snored beside him. They were no longer classified as animals. They were Earth's first interspecies heroes. And the galaxy? The galaxy learned that day that the most dangerous thing you can underestimate is a creature that loves you enough to fight back when someone tries to take you away. Because sometimes loyalty isn't taught, it's chosen, and sometimes that choice rewrites history.